What's up, guys? Welcome to the Impostor to Icon podcast. I am your host, your wingman, Thomas Edwards, and I'm so glad you're here. I have a question for you. Have you ever felt like it's been tough to fully be yourself? I mean, whether it's with your friends, whether you're at work, whether it's with your partner, whether it's on dates, when meeting people that are new. Have you ever felt like, man, like if I really showed people who I was, they would not accept me. I'd be rejected and ostracized from society, destined to be alone again. If you felt this way, just know that you're not alone. I work with plenty of clients who have felt this way. I myself have gone through this process, and that process nearly killed me. Trying to hide certain parts of myself from certain people, trying to maintain a particular image, especially in my 20s, trying to be the wingman and whatever that meant to me at the time, or at least what I thought people thought it meant. It's a struggle. It's a struggle to not be yourself. And so in this episode, I'm going to talk about the importance of authenticity. I'm going to talk about actually what I believe in, one of my core values, which is authentic polarization, and 3 steps to really creating that real change that brings out the best version and the most realist version of you. And we're going to go into 3 very particular steps that's going to help really transform things. And I'm going to share my own personal anecdotes, if you will, around what it took for me to make these type of changes and what it can do for you potentially. So I want to kick things off with this idea about, which is the first point, is recognizing the need for authenticity, right? Like if sometimes it can be very clear when you're not being authentic, but it also can be pretty subtle too. Maybe there's things that you're not even thinking about. They're subconsciously coming out as a way to protect yourself from outing yourself. And here are some signs that I want you to check in with and see if you feel like these are signs of living inauthentically. 1, which is you're feeling constantly drained or unfulfilled despite outward success. This really rang true for me. I remember when I had first started the professional wingman, it was only a few months before I was on the front page of most major publications in the world at that time, let alone in this country. And within a few years, I was just flying around the country, working with clients. I was on national TV shows, daytime talk shows. People knew me, so to speak. And I felt like I built this image that I had to keep up. I had to be the guy that knew all the hottest places in town, that had all the hookups, that was really good with the ladies, no matter who I was talking to, that was well connected. And while a lot of those things were true, it became my entire image and my focal point. And while I did create a lot of success for myself, I was making 6 figures, I was pretty well known, I had met the love of my life, there was a lack of unfulfillment. There was a lack of fulfillment that I was experiencing that, like I said, nearly killed me. It really weighed me down and I felt drained. It was really tough. And so the second sign that I also noticed was I was frequently saying yes to things when I really wanted to say no, right? And a lot of those yeses that I was saying to was for the sake of maintaining appearances. A great example was when people would invite me to go out and, it'd be 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And the truth is I really wanted to go to sleep. I wanted to get some rest, but I felt like if I didn't do that, then I wasn't truly the wingman. The wingman steps up at a moment's notice and can go all night. This was the story that I had created, the image that I thought people had of me, and I would just go out, not wanting to be there. That was a struggle too, because then I was out in public and wanted to hide. And the only way I knew to hide was to consume alcohol and numb myself so I didn't have to feel my emotions. And boy, did that start a spiral that got out of hand real fast. So are you saying yes to things when you really want to say no and you're not giving yourself that chance to say no? That's another chance that you're not being authentic. And the third sign is noticing a disconnect between your public persona and your private thoughts. This actually showed up in my work. I love working with my clients and I love bringing change to them, but there was a certain point where especially in the dating process, it felt lather, rinse, repeat. A lot of the guys are going through the same struggles, and I had to do the same thing to show them how it worked. And it just became monotonous. And I, of course, had to maintain this public image. And so I went through with it. But internally, my thoughts were not healthy. And they were not about my clients. My clients were who they were. They needed the support. And so I didn't blame them or project onto them, but I was projecting onto myself, and I was beating myself up for not being authentic with what I was thinking, and not really feeling like my persona was who I was, truly who I was. So if you are thinking to yourself, man, I am experiencing success, but I don't really feel fulfilled, and it's really draining my energy. If you're frequently saying yes when you really want to say no, or you're noticing a disconnect between your public image but your private thoughts, and those private thoughts are only shared with you, then chances are you're living a life that's inauthentic. So what do you do about it? What do you do to make the change to go from living inauthentically to living not just authentically, but authentically polarizing? And so we have to understand the costs. Like, what is actually happening when you're choosing not to be authentic and staying and being willing to express your true self? Well, there's three things that take place. There's increased anxiety and stress from maintaining a false image. I mean, I remember at a certain point, it got to the point where I was living two separate lives, right? At home, I was a husband, I was a father, I was a business person, providing for my family, being that loving, caring person. And then out there, I was the wingman. I was bold, I was gregarious, I didn't give a what about what was going on. If I wanted something, or if I wanted to make something happen, I went there and I did it. And I was also priding myself on being a chameleon. Like I knew that I could be whoever I needed to be for you to get what I wanted out of you. And it became a weapon for me that just wasn't good. And the more I lived that type of life, which was 100% inauthentic to who I really was, the stress and the anxiety around not only keeping these lives separate, but also trying to live up, because I was constantly trying to one up myself every time I went out there. And unfortunately, I was successfully able to do that. So it created added anxiety, added stress about, man, what do I need to do now to kind of show that I'm even better than that persona that I established the last time? I mean, it was just so much added pressure that was just so unnecessary for me. But it also did the second thing, which was it strained a lot of relationships due to a lack of connection. I started to hang out with, let's just say, the wrong crowd. And a lot of our relationship was built on drinking. And there wasn't any depth to it. It felt like depth, and it felt like connection, because when you're under the influence, you're feeling like happy-go-lucky, and you're social, and you're a butterfly, and I didn't need that, but it just made it even more amplified. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I met all these amazing people, and I made all these connections and had all these conversations, but that was not happening because I was still feeling lonely. I was still feeling disconnected. I was still feeling isolated. And then feeling isolated, then I went home and I felt the same way too. So the relationship with my wife, the relationship with my daughter was starting to strain, because I wasn't making the attempts or feeling like I could make the attempts to make genuine connections due to the tension between these two worlds that I had created for myself, and these two different personas, and the inauthenticity between the two. And then the last one, which was probably the most significant, was I missed out on opportunities for growth and meaningful experiences. I would, go so hard at night trying to prove myself to whoever was willing to watch me, that the trade-off was being too hungover to be present for other meaningful experiences that would take place during the day. I would choose my persona over other opportunities, whether it was professionally or even personally, that could get me further ahead in life, because I wanted to maintain that persona. It wasn't really necessarily just all about drinking. A lot of drinking took place, and it fueled my addiction. But the truth was, it was me chasing that persona and wanting to make sure that, that persona was wrapped around my identity, which was wrapped around my business. And if I lost that persona, then I would lose business and I would lose my identity. And so there was a lot at stake that in my mind, I created this position where there was a lot at stake if I didn't do what I could to maintain or level up that persona, which, by the way, let me remind you again, was completely inauthentic to who I was at the time. And so I'm creating this gap in this tension between this persona and who I really am, and the inauthenticity in between was getting wider, and the tension was growing and getting stronger over time. And I was just missing out on opportunities, missing out on professional opportunities. I mean, there were so many different directions I could have gone, but I missed out on that because I chose my persona that I wasn't aligned with over everything else. And so if you're in a situation where you're feeling a lot of stress and anxiety from not being yourself, if you wish you could have expressed yourself in a true nature, maybe there's a lot of things going on out there in the world that you want to talk about but don't feel like you can, or you're worried that if you do, that there's going to be consequences, you're probably feeling the anxiety and the stress about it right now. And you're probably thinking, man, like if I don't do this, maybe I could be missing out on opportunities. Maybe I'm straining connections and relationships because I'm not willing to express myself in the way that I genuinely want to. And these are the costs. And this exponentially increases over time. I mean, when I got to the end of my addiction, I had almost nothing. I mean, I almost lost my family. And I had certainly lost a lot of my business, and I lost a lot of relationships. And all I had was the stress and anxiety of what do I do now? And I don't want you to be in that space. And so understand that there's true cost, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and sometimes even spiritually. There's true cost of when you're not being in alignment and truly expressing yourself. So let's talk about the benefits, right? If those are the costs, what are the benefits of being authentic, right? So here's the thing that changed the game for me. It actually showed me what the difference between confidence and self-confidence was. And so what ended up happening was my self-confidence increased and I stopped feeling like an imposter. Because when you are creating this persona that's not authentic with who you really are, the tension that I keep talking about is the imposter. It's that part of you that says, you can't keep this up. This is not who you are. Or maybe it's the opposite, right? Maybe you're convincing yourself that's your persona, but the truth is you really know that's not who you are, it's this. And it's part of you is trying to tell you, like, this is not who you are. Why are you doing this? Why are you betraying or turning your back to who you really are? What are you getting out of that? And so this tension in between these two different personas, the real you and the fake you, is the imposter. And to go back and talk about what confidence and self-confidence is, confidence, to keep it really simple, confidence is what you say to other people about yourself, right? Verbally and non-verbally. Self-confidence is what you say to yourself about yourself, verbally and non-verbally. So back then, when I was living this double life, if you will, of not being authentic, I was beating myself up. I was saying the most terrible things to myself behind closed doors. These are the type of things that I would wish never anyone else would hear or say to themselves, but I was doing this to myself repeatedly every single day throughout the day. So over time, as I became more aligned and authentic with who I was, the self-confidence increased. The things that I was saying to myself about myself were more positive. And I stopped feeling like an imposter because I was being who I was. There was no fake version or there was no synthetic version of me out there or here. I was being authentic, and so there is no imposter in that moment. The second thing is I was able to build deeper and more meaningful relationships, both personally and professionally. You know, my relationship with my wife went to another level. Connection with my daughter went to another level. But outside of the home, I was able to build so much more meaningful connections that were built on values, hobbies, activities, shared interests. None of it was around recreational activities like drinking and stuff like that because I'm sober. So it forced me to be in a position to create those connections. And here's the truth. I wanted those connections all along. I just didn't think that this was going to be the way for me to do it. I thought it was going to be through socializing and drinking and being that guy. But I could just be me. And how amazing is it that just by being me, I'm attracting the people who I'm meant to have in my life, who have my back, who are with me 24/7. It's a beautiful thing. And so being my authentic self is actually bringing my people into my tribe. And the last thing was it increased my creativity and it increased my productivity when I was aligned with my true passions. I made a name for myself because of being a dating coach and a dating expert. And I felt like my persona and my personality and my identity was wrapped around that. But once I let that go, I realized that that wasn't my true passion. Dating is something that I'm expertly skilled at. And that's not what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about unleashing your potential. I'm passionate about you guys overcoming your inner imposter and living an iconic life filled with impact, fulfillment, and purpose. That is what I care about. How that happens, whether it's through dating, whether it's through your marriage, whether it's through business, whether it's through other things, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. I want to have the conversation with you about what's going on inside and how do we overcome that so you can go out and live your life. And if it's dating related, that's fine. If it's weight related, it's fine. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not a business coach. I'm not one of these other coaches or anything like that. What I'm saying is I'm a coach who can help you identify what's going on internally, and then you can go out and you can apply it to however you want. That is my passion. And when I'm in alignment with that, my coaching and the people that I've worked with and my business has never looked better. So the creativity, the productivity, all of that, my energy, my efficiency, it all has leveled up because I'm staying true to who I am. So that is really the importance of understanding and having an awareness of what it means to live inauthentically and then living authentically. So how do you uncover your authentic self, right? That's the next question, right? So you know the costs, you know the benefits, you even know if you're feeling this way, right? So how do you uncover this? Well, first thing is, there needs to be some practices. There needs to be some techniques to implement for you to start to tap into that authentic self. And the first thing that worked for me was self-reflection and introspection. So I would go through a practice where I would journal every single day. And I would reflect on my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors to understand myself more. Did I react purely out of feeling, or did I react with intention? What parts of my ego caused me to react that way? And what was the story that was governing that? Can I change that story so I can now be more proactive and be more productive to society, to my family, to my life? And doing this totally accelerated my growth. Doing this every single day, I literally felt the compound impact of that. And in fact, it got to a point where I created my own journal, which is prompt-based. So you go in there and it prompts you. It asks for your name and it asks you what's going on and the feelings and the story. And it really guides you through this process where essentially you're having a conversation between your ego and your soul, and you're getting to a resolution of not just healing, but understanding and how you can take this lesson and apply it to other areas of your life. We call it the Level Up Journal. And if you want access to that, comment below and I'll send you guys a personal link for you guys to try it out yourself and see what it's like. So that's the first thing. Second thing was I meditated. I started to understand what it means to become self-aware. Once again, I talked about being confident and self-confident. Well, there's a difference between being aware and being self-aware. Being aware being aware of what's going on around you and how the environment may be impacting you. But becoming self-aware is how you are impacting the environment that's around you. And when I started to meditate and be in stillness or quiet, sometimes I would walk, but just to be with myself and my thoughts, it made me see more of my real self and the kind of things that I wanted to do, the thoughts that were going through my mind, the kind of feelings that I wanted to feel. So much came up that were suppressed because that alternative persona did that. And I wanted to bring those up so I can actually start to connect more with my real self. But the only way I can do that is by sitting with myself. So meditation was another big practice of mine. And then the third thing was I started to reflect, and I basically created a timeline that allowed me to identify pivotal moments and experiences in my life, or even patterns. So if I noticed that there were certain things that would trigger me, I would reflect on that and I would process that. If I look back in my life and there were certain points in time where I could see, oh my gosh, that's where that pattern started, or wow, that moment was really pivotal in either bringing me closer to alignment with who I really am, or actually pulling me apart, or pulling me away from who I really was. And just being able to reflect on that, because this process is never done. I think the more you become in alignment, the more you get to know yourself. And I think you get to know yourself, the more you live. So it's always important to look back and see those moments of when did you pull away from being your true self, and when did you come closer to being your true self. And those three things really, really helped. By the way, it's so much easier to track these things when you have your own what I call your own personal scoreboard. This is a tool that I created that I have my clients use to track and level up your life. Any area of their lives. And so if you like access to this tool, do me a favor, go to theprofessionalwingman.com/apply, fill out the form, and then I'll reach out to you with details on next steps. So after we practice these techniques for like deep self-reflection, then we go into identifying core values and passions, right? Part of being authentic is actually understanding what are your passions, what are your core values, and what are you going to live by? What do you stand for? So the first part is like you value, do what we call a value sorting exercise, right? You prioritize personal values from a list. So maybe you start off and you kind of just brain dump what values are important to me, and you write down a bunch. Prioritize them. I remember doing this exercise. I must have wrote down maybe like 25 things, and then I just whittled it down until I got 12 core personal values that were really important to me. And once I got clear on that, then it became very easy for me to understand who I wanted in my life, how I wanted to live, how I wanted to show up. And things just got a lot easier and clearer for me. So definitely write down a list of all the values that are important to you, that you believe, and then whittle it down to maybe your top 12, 10, or if you want to keep it super simple, your 6. And those are the main values that you're going to live your life with. These values are subject to change based on your life's experience, but at least you'll have something to build off of. And then here's another one. There's another exercise we do, which is called kind of the peak experience analysis. Basically what this is reflecting. You reflect on moments where you felt the most fulfilled. Like, what were those moments where you felt like, man, like this is what I've been living for, this moment. What are those moments? Write them down. See if there's a pattern there, because it probably is. There's probably a pattern that is present that is showing you when you were living at your peak, this is what was going on, and this is how you were living, and this is how you were showing up. And it's going to leave clues. And then when you look back and you see what you connect back to your values, then you're going to realize, oh, okay, this is why I felt the way I did. This is why I did the things I did, because I showed up with this and these were in alignment. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is you explore your passions. So you try new activities and you note your emotional responses, right? Maybe there's some things that you want to get yourself into. Well, why don't you spend some time around the activity to see if you actually would enjoy it? Maybe then after that, if you still do enjoy it, maybe start practicing it and see how you feel and what your thoughts are about it. Maybe it's too frustrating. Maybe it's too difficult. The learning curve is too steep, or maybe it's actually pretty nice, or maybe you enjoy the learning curve, right? Like, notice what's going on, and then you can start to go in there. Maybe there are things that you've done in the past that now you stopped doing that you now want to bring back. I know for me, the number one thing that kind of even created this whole process of my personal redemption was video games. I loved video games growing up. It was a channel for me to express creativity, to unlock my mind, expand it, and to come up with interesting ideas of how to solve problems. That was really the big thing for me. And I got rid of that in my 20s because this wingman persona, there was a story or a limiting belief there that said, the wingman doesn't play video games. The wingman's cool. Video games are not cool. Can't do that. And I eliminated that in my 20s. And then I started to bring it back. Now, am I playing video games all the time? No. But I do allow it to be in my life because there are moments where I might want to have some creative expression, or I want to unlock or open myself up to something. So I play video games as a tool for me to do that. Plus, they're fun. And why would I take away that type of fun that was always present for me, even when I was a kid? So that might exist for you as well. So being able to do a little bit of a passion inventory and seeing what are the things that you love and maybe the things that you may want to love, and exploring that. Now, those three things, your values, your peak experiences, and your passions, now we're starting to build a little bit more of who you really are. And then from there, we got to take a look at some limiting beliefs. And so one of the best things you can do is you can do what's called a belief log. And you kind of want to track your negative self-talk. There are studies out there, do not quote me on this, but there are studies out there that show that most of our thoughts in our daily lives are negative, and most of our thoughts are repetitive. So that means most of our repetitive thoughts are negative. And it's very subtle, that if you were to track how often you talk shit about yourself, you would be amazed. For me, it was pages on pages on pages on pages on pages. And the stuff that I was saying was absolutely ridiculous. Like, if anyone read that and they were thinking about that about themselves, they would be crushed. And it just made me realize these are deep-rooted programs. Where did they come from? I must have got them from somewhere. Maybe some of them I created myself based on my experiences, but I must have got them from somewhere. So when you do a belief log, you get to notice the negative self-talk. And so how do you kind of overcome that? Well, you use the what if technique. What if that wasn't true? What if the opposite of that was true? Right? And you start to ask the what if. And this is what I call living in possibility. Right? When you live in possibility, now you start to see alternative opportunities to present themselves. And so the what if technique allows you to question these long-held stories, these long-held programs, to see, well, what could it look like, right? I joke around and say, like, if you knew there was a multiverse, which, by the way, I believe that there is, what would it look like in various multiverses, right? Like, what universe would the various stories apply? Because in this one right now, you have one story, but what does the other universe say? What does the other universe say? What does the parallel universe say? What's the opposite, right? Like, you start to play with this and you see different opportunities that present itself. And when you start to do this, then you can start to reframe some of these stories to shift your perspective on your own personal limitations, right? These beliefs that are holding you back, or negative self-talk, are ultimately just limiting self-beliefs. So how can you use the what if technique to reframe these personal limitations? And all you need is one shift. Even a 1% shift makes a huge difference in someone's life. And I always focused on, if I can just have someone take their perspective and just shift it a little bit, that could be a life changer. And I've seen it happen so much in real time, and also working with my clients virtually. So there's the three things around how to uncover your authentic self. So it goes back to, doing deep reflection, deep introspection, identifying your core values and your passions, and then recognizing and challenging your own limiting beliefs about yourself. Now, how do we put this to action, right? At the end of the day, what do we do? How do we implement authentic polarity in your life? Now, once again, it starts with three things. First is, it's about aligning actions with your authentic self. So I created a personal mission statement, and it's designed to be as a decision-making guide. In my life, I believe that, I'll just say this mission statement. My mission statement is to play above the game of life and help others do the same. That's it. My personal mission statement. It is very aligned with my business mission statement, which is to help people master the game of life, have them overcome their inner imposter, and live iconically. But for me, I believe my purpose here is to help people play above the game. That's it. And that helps me make better decisions in my life. It creates a lot of clarity around that. So what's your personal mission statement? And by the way, you don't need to share this with anyone unless you want to. This personal mission statement is yours. And it doesn't have to be something that you hold on to the rest of your life, because you're going to have life experiences and that personal mission statement will evolve as you live your life. But start with something that's very clear and meaningful to you. That'll help you get out of bed and make sure that you're being your fullest self. That personal mission statement. Second thing is implement small daily habits that reflect your true values. So when I have my scoreboard, I look at what I call my HP, which is my healthy practices, and they're all in alignment with the kind of life that I want to live based on the values that I want to live by. And yes, like exercise is in there, proper nutrition is in there, getting my steps in is in there, meditation, priming, journaling, connecting with a friend, talking to a stranger, demonstrating love and appreciation for my wife and my daughter, learning something, sharing something of value, asking, like there's so many things, but these are all aligned with my personal values. So what daily habits can you start to implement that's going to really fortify your own value system? Maybe it could be taking cold showers. Maybe it's proper nutrition. Maybe it's working out. Maybe it's connecting with someone on a deeper level. Whatever it might be, start creating these small daily habits and then find a way to track them so you can see your growth over time. And then the third part is gradually adjusting your environment to support your authentic self, right? Like if you are trying to be yourself, but your environment is not indicative of that, you're going to have a really hard time because you're going to see your outer world not be reflective of your inner world. And this is where a lot of people struggle. They feel like their outer world is not connected or I guess reflective of their inner world. So start making those changes, and you can start small. Maybe it's your desk space. I spent a good amount of time figuring out what I wanted my desk space to look like that was reflective of me. And there was one point where I felt something was really missing in my life. And I thought I needed something that was referenced to a game. And I ended up finding this, for you gamers out there, a POW block that lights up. And for those of you who aren't aware of the POW block, in Super Mario, when you hit this POW block, it eliminated all the enemies that were on the screen at a moment's notice. And I loved having that because for me, it's just a reminder that I have access to this power to eliminate all imposters, all obstacles in a moment's notice. And it's just a cool piece that I have on my desk. But that's just a very small example. I try to expand this now around my house. I expand this in certain ways in terms of where I put things to make life easier for me, because that's one of my values is not so much convenience, but ease and efficiency. And so whatever that is, try to start to make your environment. You can't expect the environment to just show up that way. You have to do your part and energetically put some things in your environment that's reflective of your values. Now, when you're choosing to be authentic, and the polarizing part is really important because you have to be so true to who you are, what you stand for, to your core so much that it's going to create a polarizing response naturally. People are either going to love and be obsessed with what you stand for, what you're about, or they're not going to like you. Dare I say they're going to hate on you. And that's exactly what you want. You people think that, oh, I don't want that. No, that's actually exactly what you want. You want to be clear on who is not your people, and you want to be very clear on who is your people, because those people will likely be very loyal to you because you guys have shared values and there's probably some alignment in your personal missions that maybe have not been communicated with. So living with this authentic polarity is so important. And I also know it requires a little bit of vulnerability, a lot of vulnerability actually. And you might be feeling like, how do I overcome this? Like, how do I overcome the fear and resistance of pushing myself outside of my comfort zone and being my true self? Well, first part is you got to spend time visualizing. You got to visualize who your true self is. Who is that? It could be a meditation practice, a guided meditation technique, or you can just sit down here. You can journal about it, stream of consciousness, but just close your eyes and visualize who is that person for you. Who is, in my case, like if I'm going from Thomas 1.0 to Thomas 2.0, like who is he? What does he look like? What is he doing? What does he stand for? What is his values? And you use this to confront and minimize those fears that are about, like, well, what if that happens? What if this happens? You visualize how that version of you handles that. And the more you do that, the more the fear starts to go away. It'll come back, but it'll go away. It will come back and it'll go away. There's no such thing as being fearless. I think people leverage fear to push them forward. I don't think you want to be fearless, because if you're fearless, you're exposing yourselves to greater dangers than you think. It's okay to be fearful. What's not okay is allowing that fear to overpower you. Feel the fear and let it go away, because it does when you let it. And that's really, really important. And to help you track this, create a courage tracker. These are moments where you get to track these small acts of authenticity. When you are being your truest self, track that. And you'll be so surprised how many more times you'll choose to be authentic, because what you track will grow. That is natural law. So have a courage tracker. How many times have you been authentic today? Can you beat that tomorrow? Can you get a high score this week? Have that going so you can remind yourself that, hey, I've been authentic. I've been courageously authentic times before. I can do that again today. And lastly, practice self-compassion. Give yourself grace. You're not going to hit the mark all the time. In fact, you might face even setbacks. You might get people lashing back at you because they didn't expect this version of you to show up. But when you're being your realest self, it's going to be different than what people expect, and they're going to react, not necessarily respond all the time. And you have to be ready for that. And you have to allow that setback to really fuel you to continue to grow. And just be compassionate, not just with yourself, but to others, but most importantly, yourself. Give yourself grace. If you have not lived authentically for a long time and you're choosing to be authentic, it's gonna be messy. It's gonna be bumpy. You're going to be in a space where you're not sure if this is truly the right thing to do. And that's okay. Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Now, the last thing is build a support system for your authenticity. What does that mean? Well, clearly identify and get those relationships and nurture the relationships that encourages your true self. There's certain people in your life who just love who you are truly. Those are the people that you want to spend more time with, because they're going to make you feel comfortable. And when you are feeling more comfortable and spending more time with them, it builds awareness. It builds a sense of understanding of how it feels to be yourself. And you use that as a measure for how you can be yourself out there and how to be more consistent in other areas and in other relationships. So identify those relationships and continue to nurture them by being your fullest self, and just watch how that grows over time. Second is join or create a mastermind group focused on personal growth. Maybe grab a bunch of your buddies together and say, hey, I want to be more authentically myself. In fact, I want to be authentically polarizing. Okay, do you want to join me? Let's do this quest together. Get a group of people to join you and do that, so you have some accountability. You have people you can check in on, and you have people who are rooting for you, right? You guys can root for each other and help each other win, because at the end of the day, the win for you is being able to achieve full expression of who you are. And if you have people on your side, wingmen, if you will, you're going to be in a much better place to succeed. And the last part is you got to establish clear boundaries with those who resist your changes. If you are being who you really are, then they either need to honor it or not, but they can't not honor it and still be in a relationship with you. So you have to make sure that you are establishing clear boundaries. Once again, this is new, and it's going to be new to them. So be sure to give them grace, but at the same time, be firm in your boundaries and how you express who you are and what's important to you. And if you're not sure what your boundaries are, they are based on your values and your passions. So spend time really understanding what those boundaries are, and then practice communicating them. And I'll probably create I'll probably do a podcast around boundaries and communication, because I think, those two things are two of the more important things in developing great relationships and moving ahead in life. And so, So understand at the end of the day, this is about, when you implement authentic polarization, this is about aligning your actions with your authentic self. It's about learning to overcome the fear by letting it go and the resistance to change, which will happen. And then the last thing is building a support system for your authentic journey. So there you have it, guys. Here's the 3 steps to real change, to becoming your fullest, your most authentic, polarizing self. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please like it. Please share with someone who you feel like needs to hear this message as it pertains to them becoming more authentic. If they're on the journey to becoming more expressive in who they are, they probably will love watching this. So share it with them. Subscribe, as I put out episodes every Friday, and so that way you don't get to miss one. And of course, I'd like you to take time and share in the comments, like, which one of these is the most powerful for you? When do you feel like you've been your most authentic self? And what's going to be your plan to start practicing becoming more fully authentic? And what do you think about the idea of being authentically polarizing too? Is that something that you're kind of shying away from? Or maybe it's something that you feel like you need to embrace now? Comment all below. I'll check them all out and we'll have a great conversation. But I really appreciate you being here. I can't wait to see you guys next week. And until then, keep staying in the game and become iconic.